Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome back to Climate Voters Tonight. Thanks for being with us. We will begin shortly as soon as some more folks join the stream. Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome back to Climate Voters Tonight. We're going to give folks just about 5 more seconds, and then we're going to get started. All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. As always, thank you so much for joining us. We're so happy to be back after a long August pause. I hope you all had as relaxing a Labor Day weekend as I did, but now it's September. The weather is starting to cool, at least a tiny bit, although not that much here in the DC area. And with Congress back, there's a lot to unpack. We've got a great show for you tonight. We'll begin, as always, with this week's headlines and climate news, plus some announcements about great events we have coming down the pipeline. Then we're going to turn our attention to a little known but hugely important part of the lawmaking process here in Washington, funding the government. Finally, we'll recap the political work of what you might have missed in August. Spoiler alert, we got involved in a special election out west that you may not have even known was happening. And now, the headlines. EDF Action teamed up with climate change makers to host a series of informational events called Hours of Action about the Environmental Protection Agency's Solar for All grants. These grants are available to states, tribes, territories, municipalities, and nonprofits, and will provide funds to expand residential solar opportunities for low-income and disadvantaged communities. To all of you who attended these sessions, and especially to those of you who wrote an appeal to your state legislator, your local paper, or your city council person to apply for these grants, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. The deadline to apply for Solar for All has been extended. Interested parties now have until October 12th to submit an application. So let's keep up the good work and spread the word about this transformative opportunity as far and wide as we can. We will be teaming up with Moms Clean Air Force to host a clean transportation education session next Thursday, September 21st from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 2:30 Pacific. As the single largest emitter in our nation, electrifying the transportation sector is critical to reaching our climate goals. And the bipartisan infrastructure law has invested billions in boosting our transition to electric cars, trains, and school buses. Join us as we hear from experts in the field and learn more about how this administration is supercharging the future of American transportation. Finally, Wisconsin Republicans are taking aim at a newly elected state Supreme Court justice, threatening to impeach her before she's even heard a single case. If you recall, I spent 2 weeks in Milwaukee last March campaigning on behalf of then candidate and now Justice Janet Protasiewicz. It was the first time EDF Action had ever gotten involved in a judicial race, and for good reason. For years, the Badger State's highest court has upheld among the most gerrymandered legislative maps in the nation, blocking our ability to elect a pro-climate majority to the state legislature. When Protasiewicz won, it seemed we were finally on the cusp of a sea change in Wisconsin. But now, Republicans are threatening to throw her out of office before a much-anticipated legal challenge to the state's gerrymander makes its way up to the state Supreme Court. It is a shocking affront to democracy and a grave threat to climate action in Wisconsin. We'll continue to keep you updated as this story develops over the weeks and months ahead. Moving on. I'm sure you've heard the news by now that we could be facing a government shutdown. And I'm sure you're asking, well, what does this mean and why is it happening? Every year, Congress's number one job is to pass legislation funding the government, ensuring agencies that protect our environment, like the Environmental Protection Agency, can operate properly. And the funding runs out at the end of this month. So, suffice to say, we're really in a time crunch. The Senate is currently working in a bipartisan fashion to pass funding legislation that invests in climate and clean energy, promotes our energy independence, and funds government agencies at the levels already agreed on earlier this year during debt limit negotiations. But Republicans in the House are threatening a shutdown, reneging on the deal they just struck to raise the debt ceiling. They are playing a dangerous game at the expense of their constituents and our climate. We know how important this is for our climate and our country, and here on Climate Voters Tonight, we'll be sure to keep you updated as the process unfolds. And if you're not already a member, go to edfaction.org/join to ensure you get the most up-to-date information as it unfolds. Moving on. While Congress may have been out in August, and me too, others at EDF Action were working overtime. I feel bad for them, but they did some good work. Yes, I know it's an off year for federal elections, but that doesn't mean that voters aren't going to the polls and candidates haven't started campaigning. In fact, state and local races are happening in many states across the country, including Virginia, New Jersey, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Kentucky. Over the next few weeks, we will touch on a few of those states and what's at stake in the November election. But in this episode, we're going to focus on a special election and the first presidential primary of the season. Let's get started. Now, if you tuned into the first GOP presidential debate, you were probably hoping, like me, to see the candidates put forth genuine plans to tackle the climate crisis. And you were probably sorely disappointed. No candidate put forth an agenda that would accelerate the clean energy transition already underway. Each made it clear they would rather protect polluters' profits than protect our health and the health of our planet. One candidate in particular stood out for his astonishing claim that the quote-unquote climate agenda is a hoax. Not only is this outlandish claim false, but it's bad politics. Post-debate reaction polls found audience members strongly disagreed with it. Simply put, denying the importance of climate action is a losing strategy for the general election. We saw more hopeful signs in the Republican race for an open congressional seat in Utah. This is a state that is coming to terms with the fact that the Great Salt Lake may dry up completely within the next decade. EDF Action Votes rallied our resources to help former GOP state representative Becky Edwards in the September 5th primary. During her time in the state legislature, Edwards sponsored significant pieces of climate legislation, paving the way for climate action in a reliably red state. Unfortunately, she narrowly lost the primary, in a district where partisan gerrymandering was intended to achieve partisan political goals, but also makes it much harder for moderate Republicans to get through a primary. Nonetheless, Edwards showed there is a constituency even in the reddest states for politicians with sensible views on climate. Now, Utah Senator Romney has announced his retirement, so we can hope that pro-environment politicians rise to the challenge in a state that has already seen severe impacts from climate change. All right, that is going to do it from us tonight. As always, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back in 2 weeks, September 28th. Hope to see you there. Climate Voters Unite.